Welcome to Mystic Memoirs. Today we're exploring Caroline Leavitt Didn't Hold Back on Robert De Niro, Bombshell Moment. Subscribe to our channel for more videos. During a high-stakes live broadcast, the atmosphere in the press briefing room turned sharply tense as the White House spokesperson delivered a pointed claim regarding the political affiliations of a federal judge involved in a controversial ruling. In an attempt to frame the decision as politically motivated, the spokesperson boldly stated that the judge in question was an activist tied to the Democratic Party, further suggesting that his appointment to the bench was a product of the Obama administration. This assertion was intended to cast doubt on the judge's impartiality and fuel the narrative of institutional bias against certain policies currently under scrutiny. However, the situation unraveled almost immediately. Within seconds of the ETC claim being made, a seasoned television reporter interrupted the flow of the statement to interject a correction. The journalist, clearly prepared and well-informed, calmly but firmly pointed out that the judge had not been appointed by President Obama, but rather by a Republican president, George W. Bush. The contradiction left a palpable silence in the room, punctuated only by the shifting of papers and the sudden intensity of media camera shutters capturing the moment. What followed was a telling pause from the podium. The spokesperson, momentarily caught off guard, attempted to regain composure, but the correction had already landed with undeniable weight. For those watching live, be it journalists in the room or viewers at home, the moment encapsulated a growing tension between political narrative and factual integrity. The ease and speed with which the misinformation was debunked drew immediate reactions across social media, triggering a cascade of commentary from pundits, journalists, and public policy experts. The exchange highlighted a recurring challenge. In contemporary political communication, the deployment of strategic, often unverified claims that are designed to sway public opinion or undermine opposition, only to be exposed under the scrutiny of fact-based journalism. The correction served not merely as a rebuttal, but as a symbol of the media's crucial role in keeping the public discourse grounded in truth. It was not just a factual disagreement. It was a moment of confrontation between rhetoric and reality. In the hours that followed, media outlets ran clips of the incident across platforms, analyzing the misstatement in real time and placing it within a larger pattern of similar errors from the podium. Commentators drew connections to previous occasions where information presented in official briefings had later been corrected or walked back. The consistency with which these fact checks emerged started to shift public conversation, raising concerns over the reliability of official statements being made during a particularly volatile period in national politics. Political analysts suggested that the error may not have been accidental. Some argued it reflected a deeper tactic of deliberately misattributing decisions or affiliations in order to discredit rulings that are seen as inconvenient or obstructive. By linking the judge to a Democratic figurehead, the spokesperson could have been attempting to galvanize a base that perceives the judiciary as politicized, thereby undermining public confidence in the fairness of legal outcomes. But the fallout was swift. Fact-checking organizations issued their own statements, clearly affirming the reporter's correction. Several nonpartisan legal analysts also chimed in, confirming the judge's actual appointment history and detailing his previous rulings to illustrate his long-standing reputation for neutrality. In the world of policy and governance, such misstatements are more than just PR slip-ups. They can shape public perception of entire institutions, influence discourse around landmark decisions, and erode the foundational trust that democratic systems rely upon. Moreover, the incident fueled a broader debate about the qualifications and preparation of those speaking on behalf of the government. Critics questioned whether enough diligence was being applied before stepping in front of national cameras to deliver statements that carry significant weight. Supporters of transparency and accountability emphasized that such moments of error should serve as a wake-up call, encouraging more rigorous internal checks and a stronger commitment to truthfulness in official communications. This moment, captured in stark relief by the cameras and magnified by digital media, became a case study in how quickly a narrative can be dismantled when confronted by accurate information. It underscored the importance of preparedness, journalistic vigilance, and the ever-watchful eyes of a public no longer content to passively accept claims without question. The ripple effects continued long after the press room had cleared out, as viewers and commentators returned again and again to that instant, where a single correction cut through layers of spin with surgical precision. The unfolding pattern of misinformation coming from the press briefing room has grown increasingly difficult to ignore, with repeated instances of inaccurate or misleading claims being made before national and international audiences. What might once have been dismissed as isolated missteps has now revealed itself as part of a broader, troubling trend. The recurrence of these inaccuracies has not only drawn intense scrutiny from fact-checkers and media organizations, but it has also sparked deeper concerns about the erosion of credibility at one of the most visible podiums in government. In recent months, several statements delivered during official briefings have been swiftly and publicly contradicted by independent sources, journalists, and nonpartisan fact-checking organizations. One particularly glaring example involved a bold economic claim related to tariffs, described not as a cost to consumers, but as a form of tax relief for the American public. This statement was quickly investigated and deemed false by economic experts and policy analysts who emphasize that tariffs, by definition, are taxes imposed on imported goods, and those costs are often passed down to consumers, not absorbed by foreign producers. The attempt to frame them as beneficial tax cuts was not just misleading, it inverted the very fundamentals of how tariffs function in global trade. The reaction from the fact-checking community was swift and unequivocal. Reputable platforms issued corrections and explanatory articles that outlined the truth, using historical data and economic models to illustrate how tariffs have historically affected prices and consumer behavior. These analyses did more than simply call out a factual error. They served as a form of civic education, correcting public misconceptions that could have long-term implications for public understanding of economic policy. Beyond economic claims, inaccuracies have surfaced in areas ranging from immigration statistics to judicial appointments. Each instance seems to follow a familiar pattern. A bold, attention-grabbing statement is made. Journalists challenge the statement, and then third-party verifiers step in to provide a definitive assessment of the truth. What's most alarming is the frequency with which these incidents occur, suggesting not carelessness but a possible strategic calculus, one in which immediate political messaging is prioritized over factual accuracy. This cycle has left many observers wondering about the level of internal review applied before such statements are released to the public. Is the information vetted through appropriate channels? Are advisors or policy experts involved in shaping the messaging? Or are politically expedient narratives taking precedence over verified truth? These questions speak not only to issues of competence, but also to the underlying philosophy guiding communication strategy. Public trust is a fragile currency in democratic institutions, and repeated misstatements, particularly when they are easily debunked, can cause significant harm. When the public begins to anticipate correction after correction, it leads to a normalization of error. The danger is not just that people become misinformed, but that they grow cynical and disengaged, unsure of what to believe and from whom. In that vacuum of trust, disinformation can flourish even more freely, amplified by social media and partisan echo chambers. Meanwhile, the role of journalists in this ecosystem becomes increasingly vital. Reporters are not merely passive transmitters of official statements, they are the first line of defense against misinformation. Their willingness to fact-check in real time, to challenge assertions on the spot, is one of the only immediate safeguards the public has in ensuring accountability from those in power. Their efforts, however, are only effective when backed by audiences who value accuracy and institutions that support transparency. The long-term implications of this pattern are profound. If the public perceives official spokespeople as unreliable, that distrust can spill over into other areas of governance. Press briefings are not just opportunities to deliver messaging, they are moments where transparency, accountability, and institutional integrity are on display. When those moments are repeatedly marred by factual errors, it chips away at the perceived legitimacy of not just the spokesperson, but of the broader administration they represent. As the number of fact checks continues to climb, observers across the political spectrum are beginning to take notice. Policy professionals, media watchdogs, and former government officials have voiced concern, warning that credibility, once lost, is difficult to recover. Trust is built on consistency and honesty, and the erosion of that trust, when rooted in a consistent pattern of misinformation, presents a challenge not just for the press office, but for the health of public. The role of media figures in today's political climate extends far beyond entertainment or commentary. They have become essential arbiters in the public's ongoing negotiation with truth, especially when official channels falter or deliberately mislead. In the aftermath of a widely publicized confrontation involving a disputed claim about a federal judge's appointment, one prominent media personality used the platform not to escalate the situation with emotion or vitriol, but to underscore the responsibility shared by journalists, commentators, and the public alike in maintaining the integrity of information. Rather than responding with personal outrage or character attacks, the reaction was one of strategic restraint and sharp focus. The moment was used as a teaching tool to call attention to the larger issue at hand, the normalization of misinformation from those in positions of power. The response emphasized not just the factual correction itself, but the importance of challenging falsehoods in real time, especially when they emerge from such high-profile and influential settings as national press briefings. This approach reflects a shift in how media figures see their role. Gone are the days when the job was merely to report or react. Now it is about holding a mirror up to the machinery of government and demanding consistency, accuracy, and accountability. The presence of misinformation in the public sphere is not a new phenomenon, but the pace and scale at which it can now spread requires a more vigilant and proactive form of journalism. When public officials make claims that are easily disproven, it becomes imperative for those in media to not just fact-check, but to contextualize and educate. What was particularly powerful about the response in this case was the emphasis on process rather than personality. Instead of allowing the exchange to devolve into a clash of egos or partisan mudslinging, the emphasis was placed squarely on the role of truth in governance and the civic cost of eroding it. By remaining composed and redirecting the conversation to the importance of factual discourse, the media presence in that moment highlighted a path forward for public dialogue, one centered on information, not indignation. The media landscape is, by nature, polarized and contentious, especially in an era where audience engagement is often driven by outrage and conflict. However, there are instances when clarity and calmness cut through the noise more effectively than bombast. In this instance, the careful, deliberate tone used to highlight the misstatement carried far more weight than a reactive outburst would have. It helped illustrate a broader narrative, that those delivering information to the public must be held to a standard not just of professionalism, but of truthfulness. Furthermore, this moment served as a reminder that the press, when functioning at its best, is not simply an antagonist to power, but a necessary counterweight. Its role is not to sabotage or obstruct, but to scrutinize, verify, and inform. And when done with precision, even a simple factual correction can have a ripple effect that extends far beyond the immediate interaction. It can reframe a narrative, re-establish a set of norms, and remind both the public and policymakers that reality is not something that can be conveniently bent to fit a political agenda. The decision to focus on the structure and purpose of truth-telling in public life also helped to diffuse any efforts to deflect or distract. Often, when inaccuracies are pointed out, those responsible pivot to claims of media bias or persecution. But when the correction is handled with clarity and detachment, it becomes much harder to cast the exchange as adversarial. The truth becomes the central actor in the conversation, not the personalities delivering it. This incident, while rooted in a single exchange, touched on a much larger conversation about the health of public discourse. It showed that when journalists and commentators engage not with rage, but with resolve, they become powerful allies in the fight to preserve democratic accountability. In a world where misinformation can be weaponized, calm and fact-based responses act as a necessary defense against the corrosion of trust and the manipulation of public perception. Ultimately, the moment stood as a case study in how media can respond to falsehoods with purpose and restraint, using their platforms not for retaliation, but for the reaffirmation of shared values. It illustrated how accountability, when exercised effectively and without excess, not only corrects the record, it sets a tone for what the public should expect from those who claim to speak with authority. In the age of instant communication and digital amplification, a single inaccurate statement can travel faster than a correction, taking root in the minds of millions before the truth has a chance to catch up. The confrontation over the misattribution of a federal judge's appointment did more than just highlight a factual error. It became a flashpoint that illuminated the deeper, systemic challenges facing public discourse. At its core, this moment illustrated how the broader landscape of information is increasingly shaped not just by what is said, but by how that information is interrogated, corrected, and contextualized. The most striking aspect of the incident wasn't just the factual inaccuracy, it was the ease with which it could have gone unchallenged had the right person not spoken up in the moment. This underscores a crucial truth about today's media and political environment. Unchecked statements, especially those delivered from official platforms, have the power to subtly alter public perception. Whether it's a comment about judicial appointments, economic data, or matters of national policy, these misstatements have long-term implications. They don't merely create confusion in the present, they shape the frameworks through which the public interprets future events. This dynamic is especially problematic because the average person relies on institutions, whether governmental, journalistic, or academic, to act as filters of truth. When those filters break down or are bypassed through emotionally charged, misleading rhetoric, a void is created. That void can be filled with misinformation, conspiracy theories, or partisan narratives that are far more difficult to dispel, once embedded. This is why accuracy at the point of delivery is so critical and why public trust hinges on the expectation that official statements reflect the truth, or at the very least, the best available understanding of it. The media plays a unique role in this ecosystem. Journalists not only disseminate information, but serve as interpreters, investigators, and, when necessary, challengers of power. In this case, the live correction of the inaccuracy did more than just set the record straight. It reminded viewers of the importance of vigilance in the face of misleading narratives. It reinforced that misinformation, when allowed to linger, can warp the public's understanding of who holds power, how decisions are made, and what principles guide governance. More broadly, the incident pointed to a critical need for information: literacy. The public must become adept at not only consuming information, but evaluating its sources, context, and credibility. This is no small task in a media landscape flooded with conflicting voices, curated content bubbles, and algorithm-driven echo chambers. The challenge is compounded by the fact that misinformation is often crafted to appeal to emotion over reason, to identity over evidence. It doesn't ask to be believed because it's true. It asks to be believed because it feels true, or aligns, with existing suspicions and fears. This is why moments of factual correction, when made publicly and with clarity, are so important. They act as small acts of resistance against the normalization of falsehood. They are not merely about defending the truth in the moment, but about preserving the long-term integrity of the conversation. They are reminders that there are still standards of evidence, of honesty, of accountability, and that these standards matter, even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable to uphold them. Moreover, the consequences of repeated misinformation from official channels extend well beyond the immediate news cycle. They shape how future policies are perceived and received, influence public trust in the judiciary, and even affect international perceptions of governance and transparency. When the highest levels of communication become unreliable, it sets a precedent that reverberates across institutions. It can breed cynicism, disengagement, or even apathy, particularly among younger generations who may already be skeptical of political processes. In an ideal democratic system, public discourse serves as a forum for informed debate, mutual understanding, and constructive disagreement. But that system can only function when there is a shared baseline of facts. Without that, debate becomes a battle of narratives rather than ideas, and consensus becomes almost impossible to achieve. The path forward demands not only vigilance from the media, but a renewed commitment to truth from every corner of public life. It requires those in power to recognize that their words carry weight, and that with that weight comes responsibility, not just to speak, but to speak accurately. The events surrounding the public misstatement and the resulting fallout underscore a powerful truth. In a democracy, words matter. The credibility of institutions is deeply intertwined with the accuracy of the information they provide. When official spokespeople stand before the public, they are not simply delivering opinions or spinning narratives, they are representing the voice of government. Every statement made from that platform carries weight, and with that weight comes a responsibility to uphold the truth, even when it's inconvenient or politically disadvantageous. Misinformation, whether intentional or careless, corrodes trust. When factual errors emerge repeatedly from positions of authority, they do more than just mislead in the moment. They contribute to a growing public skepticism that is far harder to repair than it is to prevent. In an era where facts are often challenged by ideological agendas, public faith in institutions hinges on the consistency and transparency of those who speak on their behalf. Once that faith is compromised, it opens the door to deeper cynicism, misinformation campaigns, and a weakening of the democratic process itself. But this episode also offered a glimpse of hope. It showed that accountability is still possible when the mechanisms of oversight are functioning. The journalists' swift correction and the media's role in amplifying the truth demonstrated the value of a free press and an engaged public. The press briefing room became, in that moment, not just a stage for political communication, but a battleground for factual integrity, and truth won. It also reminded us of the importance of composure and clarity in the face of misinformation. Instead of reacting with outrage or aggression, those who corrected the record did so with focus and professionalism. That approach not only strengthened the validity of the correction, but set an example for how public discourse should be conducted. It wasn't just about calling out an error, it was about reinforcing a culture of truth and accountability. Going forward, this incident should not be remembered solely for the misstatement itself, but for the way it was handled, the response it provoked, and the conversations it sparked. It should serve as a case study in the importance of accuracy in public communication, the vital role of fact-checking, and the enduring value of journalistic integrity. In a world that moves quickly, where headlines flash and fade in a matter of minutes, the commitment to truth must remain steady. It is not always glamorous or easy, but it is essential. The future of informed democracy depends on it, not just on the actions of the powerful, but on the vigilance of the press and the attentiveness of the public. As this moment showed, even in the face of falsehoods, truth still has its defenders, and, when it is spoken with conviction, it still has